Hello, my name is Brian Mueller. I am the founding member of Lexstop Law Firm. Today I wanted to do a short presentation specifically targeted towards college and college-age students. It's entitled Criminal Law in College, What to Know Before You Go. I'd like to start this thing off by asking a few questions. How many of you out there plan on attending college? How many of you are already in college? Now, of those, how many of you would like to go to a professional school? Would like to become a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse, you name it, any sort of professional, CPA? Okay, how many of you guys are just in high school and you're like, I don't care about college, I don't want college. As soon as I get done with high school, I just want a job. Hopefully all the hands are raised now. If they're not, I don't know what to tell you. But these are the people I want to really target this presentation towards, and I would like you to pay attention for the next 15-20 minutes as we go through some of this stuff. These are the most common areas college-age kids get into trouble with, and I think you'll find it very beneficial to listen closely as we go through some of this stuff. Basically, I'd like you to avoid the common pitfalls and common mistakes that most college or college-age students make in their time. I'm not saying every college student will make them, but the people that do make mistakes, these are the most common ones you'll find. It's important to know this because if you plan on applying towards professional school, such as becoming a doctor, a lawyer, CPA, nurse, you name it, most of those have a character and fitness requirement, which requires you to disclose information such as, have you ever been arrested, have you ever been convicted of an offense, or have you ever been disciplined by the university or undergraduate school that you attend. And either getting in trouble or not disclosing that you got in trouble can get you into a lot of trouble down the road and cause you some serious problems. And the other point I'd like to make here for the people that are just like, you know what, when I get out of high school, I just want a job. I wanted to make a big point there, which is any sort of criminal offense can adversely affect your ability to get a job, just as it could applying to a graduate school, etc. And the reason for this is if there are two virtually equally, if there's two equally deserving candidates for a position and one has a criminal record and one does not, I can tell you chances are the person without the criminal record is going to get that job or get that position in graduate school. So that's why it's really important to know this stuff. I obviously don't have a lot of gray hair yet, but I thought I was young enough to kind of talk directly to you in a manner that you'd understand and appreciate. So let's get started. Alright, this slide here just kind of goes over a brief overview of what we'll be going over. Speeding, traffic-related offenses, we'll go through some statistics, common areas, drug-related offenses, and some other common offenses that people find themselves in trouble with. Just based on people that I know that have gotten into trouble, these are the most common areas that they've really had trouble with. So I wanted to touch on all those. We'll touch a few other places, but for the most part we're going to veer there, and as well as I will try and throw in relevant examples from the current news. Right now it's early March in 2014. So please keep that in mind if this video looks a little dated. It's kind of important to know, as I touched on before, it does affect your ability to get a job, graduate school admission, professional status. In this day and age, with the internet and the world kind of getting smaller and flatter, a lot of that information that used to be off limits or very difficult to find is now very easy to find. You don't want to find yourself getting into trouble either with the university or with the local authorities because, again, two equally qualified candidates, but one has issues or red flags character-wise because of university trouble or just general trouble. They're probably going to take the one without the problems. As I said before, it does affect your professional status. For lawyers, it's called character and fitness. You have to fill out an application disclosing every time you've ever been arrested. Basically, even if you had a speeding ticket or a traffic ticket, all that stuff goes on your record, and failing to disclose it can cause you serious problems down the road, because they may actually prevent you from getting your license. Along the same lines, doctors, accountants, nursing, they all have requirements that have you disclose it stuff. And again, it's not real hard to do a basic criminal record search to see if someone's been arrested or convicted. Even in Missouri, there's a thing called CaseNet where you can go on there and just check out, see whether someone's been arrested or not. And the other part of it too is sometimes it's very hard to get those records quashed, even if you didn't do anything wrong and you were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but otherwise didn't have any criminal offenses or committed anything wrong. Just the mere fact of you getting arrested and being in that wrong place at the wrong time can hurt you. And so that's why I brought up sealing and expunging records. It's a way to try and prevent that from getting out. But basically, if a police officer has probable cause to arrest you, it's going to be very difficult to try and expunge or seal those records to prevent those records from leaking out to the general public. And even if you're lucky enough to do that, it's expensive. So we're going to try and go over some common areas. No nonsense, just kind of go over the general places and things to avoid, so you don't put yourself in a situation where you could find yourself having to seal or expunge those records. The first kind of overall point I wanted to make is there's kind of two ways people can get into trouble. There's university discipline, and then there's the real police or the local authorities that make arrests and citations for people. Both of them are going to hurt your ability to get into a graduate school. And one of the most common ways people get into trouble is they think, okay, it's a university police officer, I don't have to listen to him. He's not a quote-unquote real police officer. Even if you don't believe that, you should give them the proper respect, because I can tell you from personal experience and seeing other people have this happen to them, where a person will mouth off or make a ridiculous comment to a university police officer, and the first thing they do is they have the local authorities on speed dial, and they call, of course, the quote-unquote real police, and then you're into even more trouble. The other point I wanted to make is a lot of times schools around the area work hand in hand with the local law enforcement affiliates. So if you get in trouble at a local level, local police officer arrests you or cites you for something, you may have university repercussions where they report it to your university, and you have problems there in terms of they want to discipline you as well. The other point I wanted to make is, even if you don't get into trouble with the local authorities, but you get in trouble with what's called a residential advisor or a university police officer, and they cite you for something and they discipline you, again, that would have to go on a graduate school application for the most part if they ask that question. So you want to avoid that. The last one, of course, is ignorance of the law is no excuse. A lot of people, when they go away to college, they go to a different state. In some cases, they go to a different country to go to school. But not being aware of the law is not an excuse for not doing that. Every place is different. Every police officer treats things differently. Laws are different from state to state. And it's important to know, have a general idea of what's legal and what's not, and avoid the things that are not legal, because it could really, really hurt you. And one of the most common ways, and I'll give you a personal example here, is I went to school in Boston. Boston, at the time, their population would increase by 250,000 when school was in session. Every year there was a whole new batch of freshmen, and I gotta tell you, the local police officers don't care who you are and don't care where you come from in terms of that. I saw firsthand a very, very smart-mouthed freshman at Harvard get arrested by a Boston police officer. You don't want to see that happen to you, but the Boston police officers see this every year. A bunch of rowdy freshmen come in, don't know how to behave themselves, don't know how to act responsibly, and they just get sick of it, and they have no qualms or no compunction about arresting you on the spot for out-of-line behavior. The other thing too is a lot of people, they go, I know my, home office, I know the chief of police in my hometown. That doesn't help you when you go away to school. You want to behave responsibly, not put yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time or in the wrong situation to really get yourself in trouble. The first one I like to kind of touch on, because a lot of people will drive to school, but it's a very common situation to get into, is just speeding and traffic offenses, because a lot of people don't think they're a big deal. However, again, character and fitness requirements, or graduate schools, they are going to ask you about this stuff. They are going to ask you whether you've gotten any speeding tickets, things like that. So you'd like to avoid speeding, stuff like that. The other thing I wanted to talk about here is because a lot of people don't realize there are felony implications sometimes as a result of speed or alcohol being involved. Most common one, or these are some of the most common ones here: construction zone tickets, school zone tickets. If you're, and this is probably one that's going to touch home a little bit, if you're texting on your phone and drinking a coffee and doing a whole bunch of else, and you hit someone in a construction zone or hit a student in the school zone, and they can prove that you were grossly negligent when you did it, they could charge you with a felony, and you could serve some serious jail time just as a result of speeding or just texting and driving. So you really want to be careful about that. No one wants that on their conscience, to have a dead worker or a dead student on their hands. So you really want to be careful with that sort of stuff. The other one I wanted to touch on too is kids tend to drive a little bit faster. You tend to slow down a little bit more as you get older. But high speed offenses, most people don't realize this, but in most states, driving above a certain limit, usually it's between 20 and 25 miles an hour over the limit, is considered careless and imprudent driving. And if you were to get into an accident and seriously hurt someone or seriously hurt a passenger in your car, you could be charged with a felony. So that's why I like to start off with this one, because most people say, well, I'm not going to do drugs, I'm not going to drink, anything like that. There's other ways where you can really put yourself into a bad position. Again, this is another one right here, leaving the scene of an accident. A lot of people don't realize this, but if you do happen to get in an accident, stay there, show your insurance card. If the police come and issue you a ticket, it's not the end of the world, but it is a big deal if you leave the scene of an accident, and in some cases, if the damage is serious enough, they can even charge that as a felony. An example close to home and recently in the news is a backup quarterback for the University of Missouri was arrested for leaving the scene of an accident. Apparently the damages were over about $1,000, which seems like a lot, but it's really not that much. If you damage a bumper and maybe something else on a nice car, you could easily rack up more than $1,000 in damage to a car. And he left the scene and then was charged with a felony for leaving the scene of an accident because it was over a certain amount of money and damages. And one of the last points I want to make here is treatments of tickets varies by state. Here in Missouri, a lot of places in and around St. Louis and a lot of the other counties can allow you to amend tickets to non-moving violations. That's not to say that that's the same from state to state or even within Missouri. There's plenty of places in Missouri where it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get a simple ticket like that amended to a non-moving violation. And again, treatments vary from state to state. So be careful when you drive. Drive the speed limit. If you're unlucky enough to get in an accident, stay there. Have your insurance card on you. Show it to whoever you need to show it to, including the police, and just take care of it. And if you're unlucky enough to get a speeding or a traffic ticket in a different state, try to get it handled. Try and hire an attorney and take care of it. But again, in some cases, that's not possible. The next thing we wanted to go over was alcohol-related offenses, and I'd like to start off here with some statistics. This is from the most recent National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. of college-age students 18 to 24. The potential injuries, 599,000. Assault, 696,000. Sexual abuse, 97,000. And then drunk driving, over 3 million. So this isn't to say that this isn't an epidemic problem, but it is a serious problem when you consider that there's only about 25 million, give or take, as of the current census, that are within that age group. So that means a significant portion are having drunk driving accidents and having a lot of this other bad stuff happen. I wanted to touch on assault a little bit. It's very common because alcohol is a mood amplifier, for lack of a better term, that people may get into a fight when they've been drinking. And even if you are not the aggressor and you are punched or kicked or whatever, and you start fighting back and the police show up, the police are likely to arrest both of you. And if you're a male, they'll probably arrest you regardless of whether you were the aggressor or not, especially if it's a female or if the other person has significant damage, regardless of whether you were acting in self-defense or whatever the case may be. So you want to be very careful about that. It's a very common problem that you see, and by the statistics you can tell why. The other one too is sexual abuse. The goal of this presentation is to really focus on a few of the major areas, so I didn't have a lot of time to go into this one. But this is a problem. Statutory rape and consent. A lot of people don't realize this, but in most all 50 states there are statutory rape laws on the books. For the most part, it's treated as a felony. Statutory rape is defined as two people engaging in sex where one is under the age of 18. It can be both the people are under the age of 18. For the most part, they will charge the older person with the crime. Sometimes they charge both, though. And statutory rape in most cases it doesn't matter what your intent was. If you have sex with someone that's underage, by law it's treated as statutory rape because you can't, someone that's underage, the law treats them as not having the ability to consent. So they treat it as a rape charge. And the other point here when talking about consent is, and you see it a lot in the news, is if a woman or a man is too intoxicated to give their consent, you can be charged with rape there. You see it a lot in the news. One of the most recent examples, although no charges were actually brought, was the case of Jameis Winston, the quarterback at Florida State. Got into quite a lot of hot water because the young woman in that case claimed that she was raped after a sexual encounter. He said it was consensual, but it caused him significant problems down the road because, again, if the woman is drunk or the man is too drunk to consent, you need to be very, very careful if you engage in sexual conduct of any kind with that person, because later on it could be a situation where you could be charged with a very serious crime. And if the girl or the man or the boy is under the age of 18, you could also be charged with statutory rape. And it's important to note here that intent, it doesn't matter. Even if you thought that the person was over 18 at the time, even if you met him in a bar, in most states it doesn't matter. If you have sex with someone that's underage, it's per se statutory rape. And the other big point to bring up here is regarding sexual abuse cases and sexual encounters in college, is that in a lot of states that's treated as a sex crime. So if you were to be convicted of statutory rape or rape as a result of the other party being too intoxicated to give their consent, you may be required to register as a sex offender in that state, and that is something you certainly do not want on your record. Again, we're going to get into drunk driving next, so I won't touch on that here. But binge drinking is a fairly serious problem, 40% in the last month, and that's just in the state of Missouri. If you look nationally, the figures are about the same across the board, around 40%. So 2 out of 3 people are okay, but 1/3 roughly have issues with it. This is just a brief overview, but this is an important point to make here. What constitutes an illegal blood alcohol concentration? Most people say, oh, well, that's 0.08%, that's across the board, it's national, thing. That is for if you are over 21. And this is just in Missouri. In other states it may vary, but for the most part it's a lot lower, which is 0.02%. To give you some idea there, this is what's considered a drink. It takes very, very little to get to that 0.08% standard. Usually a drink, or even 2 in an hour period, is going to put you at or over the legal limit to drive, and almost no alcohol will put you over the limit if you're under 21 in the state of Missouri, and pretty much in any state in the country. If you have a little bit of alcohol, you're going to register blood alcohol content above 0.02%. This just references some common things that could cause increased alcohol levels, but the main point here is that it's very little that causes you to be drunk. And a lot of people think, oh, I can just drink a cup of coffee or something like that, and that'll sober me up. That's not the case. Your body metabolizes it at a pretty standard rate, and you're not going to hurry that up by drinking coffee or sleeping for an hour or something. You're still going to be drunk when you wake up. If you were drunk before you went to bed, and if you were well above 0.08%, you shouldn't be driving. And if you're above 0.02% in Missouri, you shouldn't be driving if you're under 21. This is another very common reason people get into trouble in college or college age is fake IDs. It's one of the first things that people get in trouble for. And I can almost guarantee you, regardless of what college you go to, is within the first 1 or 2 months of being in college, the local authorities really are on the lookout for people trying to pass fake IDs at bars or liquor stores. And I can almost guarantee you someone in this room will have someone arrested or cited for having a fake ID because they walked to the nearest liquor store near the college campus, or they walked to the nearest bar near the college campus and tried to use a fake ID within the first month of school. I can almost guarantee you, regardless of where you go to school, both of those things will happen, and you don't want it to be you that it happens to. This is just the law in Missouri, but all 50 states have laws on possessing fake IDs. In Missouri, it's a Class A misdemeanor. I'm not familiar with all 50 states, but I'm sure in some cases it can be treated as a felony, so you want to look out for that. The next one I wanted to go over is minor in possession of alcohol. In this case, the law is, if you're in possession of alcohol and you're under 21, you can be arrested or cited for being a minor in possession. A lot of people aren't aware of the exact nature of the law. They think, well, the police showed up, I didn't have a beer within 10 feet of me, and I was drunk when the police showed up, but I didn't have a beer within 10 feet of me. Is that person guilty of minor in possession? The answer is yes. Your body is possessing alcohol and you are a minor. It's an important point to make, but people never fail to mess that up. And the other point to make is it's something called constructive possession. It's a legal term, but basically what it means is you don't have to be in possession of alcohol. You can have constructive possession of it. If, for example, the police show up and a beer is right here, and I am under 21, I may theoretically be charged with constructive possession because I knew it was there. I could have had control over it by just reaching out and grabbing it. Police could charge you or cite you with a minor in possession as a result of that. And you don't want to find that happening to you, but again, especially the first few months, that's when the local authorities and the university police are on the lookout for it because they know some freshman is going to come in there and try and stretch the rules, and hopefully you're not one to get in trouble for it, but the standard for them to arrest you is very, very small. If they have probable cause to believe that you were drinking or if you were in possession of alcohol, they can arrest you. And that goes for something like constructive possession where you didn't actually physically, maybe you didn't even touch the beer. That may not prevent a police officer from making the case that he thought she had control over it, and that was the probable reason, or that was the basis for him arresting you or citing you for minor in possession, and at which point you've got a whole bunch of legal consequences to deal with. Public intoxication, another big hit here. I can almost guarantee you, regardless of what college you go to, you will know of several people that within the first few months or at some point during their college career be cited for public intoxication. Again, this brings up the point that laws vary from state to state. In Missouri, there is no public intoxication law. However, there is a prohibition of drinking in certain places, and those places are pretty broad. In St. Louis, they have disturbing the peace, drinking in public. So even if you think, okay, I know the state law, I'm okay. In St. Louis, could still be considered a crime, and that's one of the larger areas in Missouri. But you need to be aware that most states, for the most part, frown upon it and make it illegal to drink in public. So you don't want to be one of those people that gets caught drinking in public because it's very expensive to hire a lawyer and try and settle it. And again, you'd have a criminal record if you got arrested for it. So you want to really avoid that. And the other point here is some states may not enforce this as strictly than other states. But you don't want to find yourself going to a state that enforces it very, very strictly and you weren't aware of it. So you just started drinking, in the street or, wherever, or on the way to a football game, and you get, arrested for it, and you're dealing with very serious consequences. So it's something to really avoid. DWI, DUI in Missouri and across the United States. The law is fairly straightforward. If you are over 21, the legal limit is 0.08%. If you are under 21 in Missouri, it's 0.02%, but that varies from state to state. I'm sure in some states it's 0% or next to nothing, which 0.02% is virtually next to nothing, and 0.08% is very little to actually get you drunk. In most cases, this doesn't go away. These records don't go away. Even if you're able to work out a plea bargain on a DWI case, in Missouri, Illinois, most states, they'll be able to tell that you were arrested for DUI. So if you were to get arrested again for DUI or in trouble again, they're going to go back and look at that and treat it as a second or a third offense. In most states, a second or a third offense can be charged as a felony. And there are other situations where a DUI could lead to a felony, and we'll kind of touch on those as well. For example, if you are drinking, you have passengers in the car, or you hit somebody on the road, and again, it varies from 0.08 to 0.02% for people that are under 21 in Missouri. If you hurt somebody while you were drinking, and they can prove that alcohol was a contributing factor and caused you to be negligent in that accident, in most cases they can charge that as a felony. especially if the person is hurting enough. In some cases, it could be ruled involuntary manslaughter if you're unfortunate enough to kill somebody while you're driving while drinking. And it's really unfortunate, but you see it in the news a lot, where someone that was under 21 or just turned 21 is driving and they're over the limit and they hurt somebody. It can be treated as you could be charged with a very low degree count of murder, which is manslaughter. In most states it's vehicular manslaughter, some cases it's involuntary manslaughter. It doesn't matter. It's serious jail time, and it's one of those things you really want to be aware of and really avoid. It's just take a cab if you've been drinking. It's very, very simple. I can tell you from just from my perspective, it's very expensive, even for a first-time offense and legal fees and everything else. You'll probably spend thousands of dollars dealing with it. A cab is, $15-20, depending on what part of the country you live in and how far away it is. How many cabs can you take before it would add up to one DUI? It's hundreds in most cases. So just take a cab if you've been drinking. There's no reason to put yourself in a bad situation like that, and then and then potentially have this following you around for years to come. The next one I want to talk about, although I threw it in the alcohol category, because usually alcohol plays a factor in this, is disorderly conduct. It's called many different things in many different areas. There's a whole bunch of different statutes that different cities and counties use to enforce it. I put some of the most common up here: disturbing the peace, disorderly conduct, hindering prosecution, obstruction of justice. For the most part, although the laws are different, they're all along the same vein, which is, even if you haven't done anything wrong, you're over 21, you drank some, didn't drink a ton, if a police officer comes up to you and they're trying to break up a party or do something like that, and they said, we need you to step back, or we need you to leave, or we need you to be quiet, you better do it. Because if you don't do it, they don't have to ask again. If you continue to make a scene, they will arrest you for one of these cases, one of these statutes. And again, it almost doesn't matter. If they ask you to be quiet, to move along, whatever, and it's a lawful request, and you don't obey it, they can arrest you for something. And it's really unfortunate, but it happens, and it will happen to someone you know of within the first 3 months of going away to college, in almost any college you go to across the country. So you want to avoid that. Again, I'll just touch on one that was in the news recently. Reese Witherspoon, famous actress, was arrested, and I believe it was for obstruction of justice. Her husband was pulled over on suspicion of drunk driving. She made numerous comments to the police officer about how I'm an American. That's usually the way you see these in the criminal law. This is America. I can stand wherever I want. I can do whatever I want. Blah 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 blah. She stood there. He told her to be quiet. Told her to go back in the car. She didn't do it. That is considered disturbing the peace or obstructing justice in this case, because the officer was trying to investigate this DUI. In some cases, it can be called hindering prosecution. Regardless, the law is basically saying, it's pretty clear. If they make a request, you respect it and you follow through right away, and you will most likely avoid any pretense of any of this stuff. In another example, I actually knew someone, it's more of a friend of a friend, but it's an important story to bring up, which is they weren't even, they followed all the requests and stuff like that, but they were playing with a police dog. I kid you not. The police officer said, stop playing with the dog. It's, the police dog's on official business. They were actually cited for harassment of a police officer for playing with a police dog. Again, if a police officer makes a request, you just honor it. there's no need to get yourself into trouble and have those consequences come up there. The next one I wanted to talk about, and we'll get into some more serious stuff here, is drug possession. For the most part, hopefully none of you guys do drugs, but the most common illegal, Schedule 1 narcotic that's out there that people have a tendency to experiment with in college is marijuana. So let's touch on that one very quickly. Marijuana laws vary vastly from state to state. In Colorado, for example, it's decriminalized, and there's no penalty for even just casual use at this point in time. But in a state like Texas, a very small amount of marijuana can be considered a state jail felony, and they will commonly push for jail time, even for a first-time offender. And a lot of times they will get it. And even though the states vary on how they treat it, it's still against federal law. And even if you live in Colorado and you're like, okay, it's not illegal up here, I can do what I want. Federal authorities may start enforcing it, and it may be a big issue, because then you're not even dealing with a local charge. You're dealing with a federal crime, and federal prosecutors among the most talented prosecutors in the country, and they will push for very, very stiff penalties if they choose to enforce it. But again, ignorance of the excuse is no excuse. Regardless of where you live in the country, it's still considered a federal crime to possess marijuana, so don't do that. One of the other things I want to touch on here again was constructive versus actual possession. And the most common way I can envision someone getting in trouble for this is, a bunch of kids are in a parking lot, next to the school campus, and they're all smoking, most of them are smoking marijuana, but one of them's not. And the police officer comes out, sees marijuana, smells marijuana. Can they arrest everybody there? The answer is probably yes. Now, can they get a conviction even against the person that wasn't smoking marijuana? Questionable. But again, in the eyes of the police officer, that person constructively possessed it. They were close enough to have control over it. They knew it was there, and they knew it was illegal. So there you go. This is another kind of common area. Oh, another marijuana story. It being in a car with marijuana. Again, this was in the news recently. Actually, again, I hate to pick on University of Missouri because it happens across the country. But the wide receiver for University of Missouri, Dorial Beckham-Green, was actually arrested for felony possession of marijuana because he was in the car where there was a lot of marijuana in the trunk. Again, I'm not passing judgment. I don't know whether he's guilty. I don't know the full story, but it's not going to stop a police officer from arresting you if he has reason to believe that you knew of it or should have known of illegal drugs being close enough to where you could control them. And then I wanted to touch just briefly on prescription drugs. Again, in most cases, they're prescribed for a particular person and for a very particular reason. And you could get in trouble for having possession of someone else's medication that you weren't prescribed. Again, you probably hear about this, but this is an important point to make. Even if you don't think it's a big deal, you don't know what the law is, and if you're in possession of ADD medication of a friend, or you've taken their pills, or whatever the case may be, in some cases that can be charged as a felony, and you don't want something like that on your record. And again, this could be a situation, and all these kind of tie in together. And the reason I say that is because in some cases someone will get arrested for disorderly conduct, but it'll lead to all sorts of other things. They get arrested for disorderly conduct or disturbing the peace, and then the police officers do a search to make sure there's no weapons on you. They find prescription drugs, or they find marijuana in the pocket, or they find a beer in the pocket. Then they charge you with minor in possession, or with possession of prescription drugs or marijuana, you name it. And then they go to book you at the police station, and then they find fake identification on you, and then they charge you with possession of a fake ID. And then instead of having just one problem, then you've got 3 or 4 problems to deal with in one of those. So I never advocate committing crimes, but my point here is that they can kind of snowball very, very quickly, and it's important to be careful about all that stuff. Okay, this is the last major topic I wanted to touch on, which is just general other offenses that kids commonly find themselves in trouble with that don't necessarily fit into the standard categories. In Massachusetts, there's a statute for keeping a disorderly house. For the most part, there's similar statutes across the nation. Basically, it means throwing an out-of-control party, or throwing a party where underage kids are present and drinking, and the owners of the house knew or should have known that they possessed alcohol. Again, one of the other ways you could get in trouble here is child endangerment. If someone's under 18 or under 21 and you supply them alcohol at a party that you're at, or you're just on the lease, theoretically you could get cited or arrested or in serious trouble for child endangerment for supplying that alcohol, or having knowledge, or constructive possession here. You should have known that they possessed alcohol. Assault, we touched on that one a little bit, but again, if 2 people have been drinking, they get into a fight, the police aren't going to try and look at who the aggressor is or whether there's self-defense is involved. They are most likely going to look at it and go, the 2 are fighting, just let's arrest them both and figure it out later. So again, if you are assaulted, you're much better off just turning the other cheek. Hopefully that doesn't happen to you, but again, another thing I want happening to you is rape or statutory rape. If a person is under 21 or too intoxicated to give their consent, you better be darn careful before you engage in any sort of sexual contact with them, because it could lead to a felony charge, and it could get you listed as a sex offender. Again, I'm going to touch on one more here, which is public indecency. Very, very common, probably will happen to someone within the first 3 months of school, to you or someone that you know. Hopefully it's not you after watching this, but they'll drink or they'll smoke marijuana or do whatever, and then they'll relieve themselves on the sidewalk, and then all of a sudden the police officer sees it, arrests them or cites them for public indecency for showing their privates off in public. And again, this is something that you may not think of, but in many states, public indecency is considered a sex crime. So you don't think about it, you go, I just had to go to the bathroom and I didn't think it was a big deal, blah, blah, blah. You really don't want to get listed as a sex offender as a result of a public indecency charge. So it's something to keep in mind and be careful of. I'd like to just kind of shift gears and just open it up for questions here, and we can go from there. Thank you.